Welcome to Building Success, a real estate podcast. My name is Nick, and I will once again be your guide as we talk to some of the best and brightest in the worlds of real estate tech, operations, and financials across the globe. This podcast would not be possible without listeners such as yourselves, so if you like what you hear and you want to hear more of it, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing the podcast wherever you get it. Whether that be iTunes, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, asking Siri to play Building Success, a real estate podcast. All of that helps us know how we're doing and helps other people find the show more easily. So on today's episode of Building Success, we are once again live from a MRI Software International Users Conference. This one taking place in London in 2018, a tech panel on the latest real estate technology trends. Moderated by Andy Birch. The panel included Richard Belgrade from Leverton, Stephen Baker from Insight Software, and Dean Nixon from Top Up Consultants. So pretty lively conversation about trends in the EMEA region. I know we had one in a couple episodes ago that was more focused on North America. This one's a little more attuned to the EMEA region. So hopefully you enjoy. Please like, share, comment. Let us know how you like this episode. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it.
Okay, so I'm going to introduce the guys here. Let's go left to right. So Richard. Richard is the CRO at Leverton. Leverton, one of our kind of technology leading partners in the AI field. Doing a lot of work with us, both from a Horizon perspective and on the Platform X side. I'll let Richard say a few words and introduce himself there.
Sure, so Richard Belgrave, CRO, Chief Revenue Officer. Some people think risk, but revenue. Represent Leverton. We are an artificial intelligence and machine learning platform that effectively expedites the process of creating structured data out of unstructured contracts. MRI partnership, particularly important because we're very dominant in the real estate space. Have a lot of experience working with landlords, tenants, managing agents, property managers with respect to lease abstraction.
Thanks. Stephen, I've known Stephen for a few years. Stephen used to work at MRI. Stephen's now working at Insight Software. Why don't you tell everyone what you're doing there?
Growing a beard is my primary occupation at the moment. It's coming along pretty well so far. I spent many happy years at MRI. I'm at Insight Software now, leading the M&A and the strategic partnerships arena. And Insight Software, if you're not familiar, many of you would know Spreadsheet Server, which is the Excel-based solution that interfaces today with many of the products that MRI sells here in EMEA. But Insight is a global company dedicated to reporting solutions for ERP platforms. So the MRIs of the world, but also works with like Oracle's and SAP and so forth. And recently through an acquisition also serves the EPM market, which is the Hyperions and those solutions. But 400 employees globally, offices in Dubai and South Africa, as well as London and Asia Pacific in Australia. 6,000 clients, 160,000 users or so. So exciting place to be, a growing space for sure.
Thank you. Thanks. And last but not least, Dean, representing the implementation side of the house from Top Up Consultants. Want to say a few words?
Absolutely. Dean Nixon, Top Up Consultants. We're an industry-leading real estate software implementation consultancy. We uniquely partnered with a number of best-of-breed solutions such as MRI, actually Insight Software as well. And we also have products ourselves which we supply to the real estate industry.
That's great. And it was not just by luck that we got three people kind of representing quite different views of getting data into the system, people getting data out of the system, and people just helping generally with the implementation of those systems to do both. So hopefully they will give a good balanced perspective on a couple of the hot topics that you're all facing at the moment. It's interesting when you talk about technology challenges. I guess we could have gone for a multitude of different ones. I'm going to bring up this eye chart. This is a representation from Gartner of the top 10 technology trends, not just in real estate, but generally impacting the market. And we see going from 2011 all the way to 2018 how they've kind of morphed. What ones have kind of just dropped off completely as really not making it, and generally the ones that have kind of stayed relatively constant are now considered probably a level of maturity that they've dropped off that kind of hype buzz area and more into just the mainstream kind of production. When we actually look at that, we consider, I love this chart and I just wanted to put it up there, but when we talk about technology, we talk about technology trends, we get a lot of hype, a peak of inflated expectations about what it might do, then people actually start scratching their heads and think, well, what does it actually do? And how does it actually benefit us? And then they kind of might drop off completely into that kind of trough of disillusionment. But the ones that actually have tangible business benefits kind of actually make it through that cycle and into that kind of plateau of productivity and being sold in the marketplace in general. So for today's kind of conversation, we've chosen a couple of topics which we think are reflective of ones that are being talked about a lot in the market, and also ones that either have already got through or are in the process of making it through into the mainstream or will do in the future. So the first thing that we're going to touch on is really the combination of that Internet of Things, big data. But rather than talk about that and sort of like hypothetical examples of how that kind of impacts you, we kind of boiled it down to kind of really the benefit of that or the output from that, which is big data analytics. So really looking at how that can drive business benefit through that data availability. So Stephen, I'm going to start with you, just to give like your explanation of what we kind of really mean by that concept, and then we'll go through it.
About getting data out and driving value. Yeah, I mean, I think Insight is a solution that is targeted at this, right? It's every business has operational systems that are required to run that business. You get up in the morning and you have to interact with that business with that solution, MRI being one. But to do kind of decision making and insights and budgeting and even some of the day-to-day business, let alone like drive really business like leading insights in terms of like where things are going to go and driving strategy, you got to assemble that data in a certain way. And from our experience in particular, Excel as a tool is a huge point of reliance, and so the solutions that we use focus on really efficiently pulling data out of a given system or disparate systems so that you can interact and construct that data in a way to drive those insights, or simply to kind of do budgeting or look at variances and things like that. Just ease of use, and I think that you're talking. That whole trough is like sort of a great explanation for this space in particular, because BI, data analytics. If you went to conferences 3-4 years ago, it was on all the charts, right? Yeah. It was like the buzzword of the moment. There was like huge promise. People invested tons of money, and those projects tended to look like big investment, high burden of like maintenance, and then very few people getting value from them, like touching the solutions. And then so then it sort of fell into that trough. And I think looking at solutions that are a little bit lighter touch, a little bit quicker time to value, and a little more practical in terms of the end users being able to manipulate the data, that's kind of where we're getting to that practical plateau.
Okay,
that's my thought.
Okay, that's good. Dean, in terms of your interaction with the clients that you serve, probably many of them are thinking about this. Or kind of asking for your advice on how to take advantage of this. What's maybe some of your thoughts around kind of best practices around adopting big data analytics?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw, as Steve mentioned a few years back, there was a big boom and a big trend in the industry of big data and analytical tools, and we've seen customers have pain points where they've been adopting these solutions, and they'll have the almost the fight of saying, okay, we've been provided this data analysis on this CLIS solution, this data analysis in an Excel solution, this data analysis in in a Power BI solution, and almost information overload to a certain extent. It has to be tamed down and obviously presented in a way that it can be analysed and reviewed efficiently. I think is the key thing to learn there. There are, you'll look at many BI solutions, many big data analytical tools, and there are literally hundreds and hundreds on the market. And I think companies get, to a certain extent, get carried away by trying to adopt all these different solutions and not actually end up. We quite often find a lot of the report analytic people we deal with on a day-to-day basis spend more of their time producing reports and analysing the reports, if you see what I mean. So we find that's one of the common pain points I find from an implementation side of things, certainly.
Okay. And Richard, your views on this area?
I think one of the things I've noticed is big data comes to the market, everyone's talking about it, but actually no one's really building a proper data strategy. So people are spending money on tools, shoving data here, there and everywhere, but they're actually not really asking themselves to begin with, what questions do I want to ask of this data? What conclusions do I want to try and arrive at? I've worked with a bunch of companies that actually have been deterred from looking at our technology because they got burned on a big data journey. And I think, for me, outside in, the reasons were they didn't have a proper strategy really around what they were trying to achieve. And I think that's often the case when you get these kind of in vogue technologies like AI, like blockchain. Kind of people just think that everyone's doing it, I've got to try and do it, and end up actually kind of, diluting the impact that the technology is meant to have.
No, that's the classic example of you've got a hammer, and then trying to go and find the nails, right? Versus what problems are you trying to solve, and get to that, and then find the most efficient way to solve them, which may not be building a data lake, for example.
Correct, exactly.
So I've seen recently with a number of organisations, particularly larger ones, that they're starting to designate someone as the chief data officer. Do you think that that's a reasonable strategy? Do you have to be a certain size to do that? Who is responsible for that kind of data role in the organisation? Steve?
I think it's an interesting question, and personally, the idea of a chief data officer to me, at least, I'm not sure we snap the chalk line as to where that makes sense in the size of an enterprise, but I think elevating that position to an executive level to me makes a lot of sense, because historically you have people sourcing or building solutions to solve a specific problem in a specific division of the company, and the data piece is always secondary. Nobody's really, that's being able to share data and consolidate data is not a primary use case. When you elevate that data consideration to that executive level, I think that turns that on its head, and then you start looking for vendors that support a strategy like that as well, because that tends to be a secondary thing in vendor selection, and that's why you end up with a vendor like MRI that's open and connected and kind of support that data strategy. So I'm kind of dancing around your question. I'm not sure what the right level, the size is, but I think it's critically important. And when people are investing incredible sums of money in the solutions, it does make sense. I think before you invest, millions of dollars in a data solution, you ought to have somebody at an executive level that's accountable for it. To me, that's a reasonable ROI investment.
Yeah. Richard?
Yeah, I think the last word you said was the most important, right? The accountability. I think without that executive level buy-in, you're never going to get that. I guess we probably all tried selling into people whose day job it is not actually really to care about data and technology. So you sell something in, all of a sudden the BAU kind of burden takes over, and actually you're taking one step forward, two steps back. So completely agree with the sentiment. Very, very important.
And Dean, your perspective from an implementation perspective, do the successful implementations correlate to someone that's clearly designated as having kind of responsibilities in these areas?
Yeah, of course. It's very important to have someone with a clear vision in order to obviously facilitate that successful implementation. As I say, I quite like the concept of the chief data officer within an organisation, but that's obviously to ensure that all the relevant exactly what these guys are saying, basically, to a certain extent, that if you're investing that sort of money in a tool, you need to make sure that it's guided in the right way from an executive level, and all the factors are taken into account, such as the vendor and the actual data itself. So, yeah.
Maybe a show of hands from the audience. Who's got someone they think is a chief data officer in their organisation, or is it simply you? Okay, a few of you. Who has maybe the CFO as the chief data officer, perhaps? Yeah, a few of you. Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, finance typically is the gatekeeper to a lot of the data in the organisation.
I think it's interesting, but how often is it like articulated that that's like, you know, is that an MBO or main business objective for a CFO? I don't know if that's that common. Like, and it might be that.
Yeah, it's
that's
a
the
good
shortcut.
question.
Yeah.
Because I think what we're seeing is a change in direction, perhaps, in terms of what the Office of Finance, the CFO, is actually responsible in the organisation. It used to be just processing the data, paying the bills, producing kind of the financial statements. But it seems to me that a lot more organisations, it's more broader than that. It's more strategic now than it ever used to be, and they kind of are perhaps building at least a lot of the analytics around company strategy as a result of that shift. Thoughts on that, maybe? No, it's okay.
I would just say it should be. I mean, whether there's a CRO or not, I think having somebody who is clearly accountable for driving an outcome is key.
Okay.
CFO.
Okay. Any questions on this topic? No? Okay, good. All right. Just a few additional kind of comments from me. I think as it relates specifically to real estate, it helps to make that ever more complex industry kind of more transparent and accessible for organizations, helps them to make those decisions a lot quicker. Using tools like MRI's analytics solution or the spreadsheet server solution gives people the capability for that self-service access, which I think is another kind of key criteria when you're considering analytic solutions, that you're actually putting it in the hands of the key kind of business users, as opposed to kind of sending it off to IT and kind of raising some kind of request. And it takes a couple of weeks to get kind of some data dump or report out of some system. I think the data volumes are exploding. People are collecting a lot more data. Do you think that that's true, that people are actually getting more data together generally about their business now to help kind of drive information and intelligence for their business? Yeah.
I think the education, obviously, companies' education of how valuable data is now has made people a lot more aware of the data that's around them, and they're storing it in obviously a lot more logical way these days, making more use of it. So certainly, I think companies certainly have taken more advantage and storing more. Yeah.
Yeah, and just simply the technology today, I think that the visualizations that are provided helps drive better business decisions as well. Being able to see, maybe instead of like this example here, for instance, we're seeing a shopping centre where perhaps if you had it just in a list report, it wouldn't be so obvious as to which tenants are overperforming or underperforming in that shopping centre, but having it colour-coded and maybe also reflecting risk associated with those tenants in terms of when their leases, etc., are expiring, becomes invaluable in terms of being able to make those decisions more quickly.
Yeah, actually I was talking to Neil Harrison, the leader, the product management leader for Horizon earlier, and like just having like the geospatial data and the new dashboard for Horizon. I mean, it brings that whole context to life. The dashboard, I think it engages the brain in a different way as well. Like people are more apt to consume the data, and maybe that's your point, like that
Yeah.
you see it like represented that way. But just going back to your previous question, like the data volume thing, I read something that said that by 2020, there's going to be 1.7 megabytes of data created per second for every human on Earth.
Wow.
Like, that's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You know, now I assume a lot of that's going to be video data. I
Yeah.
mean, it would have to be, right? But that being said, like, you know, I think one of the problems is going to be how do you digest data that's created in an organic way, but B, like how do you process that? I mean, you gotta be able to. I think there's a question of like maybe we're collecting more data, but is it the right data? Like maybe we're not being selective enough, you know. And I think that maybe it goes back to the question of like, what before you start collecting every data point available, like what problem are you trying to solve?
Yeah, but also how are you collecting it, right? You know, we've seen
Yeah.
a lot of businesses that are looking at AI who have been collecting data for 2 to 3 years, but using humans to do so. Now humans get tired, humans make mistakes, humans don't really have a consistent approach to capturing data. So you spend 2 years building this kind of repository of information, and all of a sudden you can't do anything with it because your data point X is meant to equate to data point Y is captured in a completely different way. And that's something which maybe we'll come on to talk about, but I think that's something which AI really supports with, right? Because it doesn't get more tired the more data you expose to it, and has a very consistent approach to the formulation of the data that's captured.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and it's a good segue into the next topic. In terms of from a big data analytics perspective, this is the one that's already out there. There's lots of tools out there that you can take advantage of, and there's a lot of expertise now in these, so that you can actually implement these solutions very successfully now to meet your business requirements. One that's probably more recent in terms of the development, and still people are kind of struggling with some of the terms, is artificial intelligence. Wow, that woke you up, didn't it? A picture of Arnie from Terminator to reflect my kind of AI apologies. It's going to sit there for a few minutes, so get used to it. But in terms of artificial intelligence, I think there's a lot of confusion. We hear the terms AI, we hear the terms machine learning, we hear the terms robotic process automation. Richard, why don't you help us understand the differences between those terms?
Sure. So I think AI, in a very rudimentary sense, is effectively giving machines the ability to replicate human behavior or processes. It's an umbrella term, right? I think actually the real life applications of AI go one step deeper. That's when you get onto things like machine learning, deep learning, RPA. Machine learning, incredible technology. It's a subset of artificial intelligence. It effectively relies on mathematical models that, without programming, learn when exposed to data. So let me just kind of paint a picture. If I talk through a real life example, so at Leviton we have a neural network, machine learning, that when we expose it to lease contracts and tell the machine that a rent charge within the lease contract equals to a rent charge data point, it is constantly learning those examples. As such, if I upload a lease contract that the software has never seen, it's able to pick out and find those terms automatically. It's very, very similar to how a child learns. So you've got a young boy, he's learning day-to-day objects. He looks at that chair, says, "Mummy, Daddy, that's a table." "No, it's a chair." Following day does the same thing with a chair that looks completely different. 2 or 3 examples in, he's kind of painting this picture as to what a chair really is. Now, you don't need to then give him all of the rules that make up what a potential chair looks like, right? He's seen enough to be able to ascertain that every time he sees an object with a back, doesn't matter what color, 4 legs, maybe 3 legs, he knows it's a chair. And that really is the kind of the paradigm that sits behind machine learning technology. Incredibly powerful. I think we're still, we've all got it on our phones, right? But I think that no one really recognizes things like Siri, things like Google Translate. They always use machine learning, but it's more in a B2C sense, and the B2B world, I think, is still waking up to really how powerful this technology can be. RPA, It's kind of, the way I would explain RPA, robotic process automation, for those that don't know. It's really a combination of software and machine learning. It uses bots to sort of replicate high volume, relatively simplistic tasks like that data entry. Typically, it's used predominantly for. Think of it like an Excel macro. In Excel macro, you effectively perform a function within Excel and you record it, and then you can repeat that function on new data sets. And RPA takes that one step further. You can record humans doing things like data entry, and then roll that kind of bot and that learning onto new processes, used predominantly in things like AP processes, so improving invoicing, etc.
Okay, great. Hand over to Dean. Dean, I know you've got some practical applications of how you've adopted some of those different technologies with your clients.
Not as far as in terms of the AI space, we haven't. No, of course not. I mean, we're still for us. I think we're still quite early on in the AI space in terms of the day-to-day implementations that we do. Primarily, we do obviously property management, investment management solution, and in that space, it's still quite a young technology, and I think people are not reluctant to adopt it. Things such as obviously lease processing, things like that, something that's reusable, but it's not to say that technology can't be adopted in property management quite easily on a day-to-day basis. There are obviously a lot of tasks that are done by property managers, owner-operators on a day-to-day basis, which an AI utility would be perfectly could be used for, and obviously cut down on a lot of unnecessary turn. I mean, it was just saying about the AI learning and the bots and things like that. I heard a statistic the other day that I think, excuse the exact percentage, but I think it's something like 75% of all Microsoft support chats now are done automatically by AI and bots. There's no person on the end of the chat window anymore, and only when it comes to that exception, then obviously someone else gets involved. And obviously the possibilities for our industry and how that can relate to it obviously are fantastic.
Great. And Stephen, are you seeing it on that side as well from an Insight software perspective? Are you using that intelligence in your analytics tools?
We aren't at this point really. It's mainly human interaction. I mean, I think one area where I think I see a practical application of potential benefit is a simplistic one. I mean, just referring, I don't know where the line is, right, between AI, because there's bots, but if you train them, they're not really AI because they're not learning or whatever. But like, the ability, one of the big struggles we see in our arena is siloed data. I mean, so you've got rudimentary tasks, you've got siloed data, and the application of bots to do a very simplistic and perhaps like crude sort of data integration. That's something that we've seen and I think has potential. At the absence of like being able to build a secure, robust integration between systems, you can have a bot go in. I mean, that's like you wouldn't have a person sit there and like go read a bunch of columns, but you can have a bot go in and like read them off and then push them over here, and suddenly you've got this data stack you didn't have before, and you didn't have to build a giant data lake, right? I mean, just again like practical application of some of these tools versus like trying to go to Mars or whatever.
Okay. Do you think it's fair for me to say that, this is a really important area for real estate more than other areas, simply because we've struggled for years in terms of creating data standards and having any kind of concept of data exchanges? It seems to me that some of the, let's say, the heritage software companies have really not done a great deal in terms of helping people collaborate with data. Is technology fixing a problem that the industry has kind of created in the first place?
It's trying to. So just a bit of background, Leviton's been around for about 6 years, 4.5 years predominantly in Germany, really working with law firms to speed up transactions. When I came to the UK to kick things off, actually before I ever went and sold anything, I went around asking people, if I've got a technology that could promise A, B, and C, what kind of challenges, problems do you want solved? And the primary one was I just do not trust the quality of data that sits in MRI, Horizon, Yardi. You unpick that, and I think it's because the process is always relatively opaque. All of a sudden, you've got 3 or 4 people involved in a process to turn a document into a bunch of data sitting in your billing engine. You can't trace that process. The moment you see it in MRI, how do you really know that's the right break option, renewal date, whatever? And I think that's one of the things that we've tried to solve with our platform. Now, we're not there yet. It's kind of slow progress, but I certainly believe that technology is the answer to kind of encourage a paradigm shift in the quality of data that sits at the heart of the decisions that this industry makes day in, day out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's actually interesting. Certainly, I'm seeing the larger organisations. We had our IEC, as was mentioned earlier this morning, in Atlanta a couple of months back. For that, we actually gave out some awards to different clients that submitted information about their implementations, and we had an impact award. And it was staggering the amount of firms that actually started implementing bots, robotic process automation, in their organisation to actually churn through processing a significant amount of data. Particularly, I don't know if this makes sense, but particularly in the retail sector, in terms of managing a lot of lease information that was coming through from their tenants.
Like sales data information?
Yeah.
Makes sense. But there's an example, I think, of where the bot is overcoming like a failure to like potentially integrate some data, right?
Yes. Yeah. Any questions on this topic from anyone in the audience? Who's actually considering AI implementation at the moment? A few of you?
That's not enough.
I tried, Richard.
Well, I mean, it's this thing, like friend or foe, and we come up against it day in, day out. I think people we've sold into, we still kind of encounter that foe kind of mindset, because the users, the people that are typically used to handling these processes manually, are kind of scared of their jobs disappearing. Yeah. But actually, we actually position this as an opportunity, right, to do more business, to focus on higher value processes. And actually just to, future-proofing, right? To kind of, avoid being left in the dust when your competitor all of a sudden has improved margins by 10% because they're using technology. The friend element is the kind of the senior decision makers, they know that technology is the future, so they're willing to spend money on it. But that doesn't mean that every day when we sell into a company, we often don't make the progress we want. And I think there's still this inherent fear about, is it really going to work? Is it really going to save you time and money? I'd always argue people to not expect too much on day one, because this isn't something that's been around for 10, 15 years. But if you're an early adopter, I strongly believe that you'll see ROI and value in the future.
What I would say, having had some involvement in the project, I think it's not a fear, that is a misunderstanding. It is a discovery, because in those early stages, the amount of manual intervention you have to do to get to that understanding, to get to the point of the solution, understanding all the different leases and the variations. And I'd love to be in an ideal world where all leases would say 10 days. That's never happening, right? So, but it's a big job, and you shouldn't underestimate it, and you can't, suddenly magic up asset resources to give you guidance in terms of what's right and wrong from within your organisation. So it's not fear, it's a resourcing issue, it's a prioritisation issue within the business.
Yeah, I think prioritisation for sure, yeah. I was having a conversation with some gentleman earlier whose boss we sold into maybe 18 months ago, but it didn't go anywhere, right? Because the people on the ground, didn't feel a burning desire to make it happen, make it work. The expectations were potentially mismanaged on our side on day one. So yeah, I think 2 very valid points.
It's always a challenging technology sale when someone like it's not a pain that may be apparent right today.
Yeah.
It won't be until somebody loses a tender because somebody else came in 10% lower because they had the AI. So I mean, I think that's the challenge at the moment is like there's education to do before people understand that, like, I don't know, payment may be the wrong analogy, but people are risk averse to that sort of thing unless like something's poking them in the eye today. And I just think we're in that cycle where people are starting to adopt, and so it's going to be less scary. But more to the point, it's going to be like the baseline. And if you're not doing it, right, you're in pain. Cost.
Yeah.
We've actually got a couple of quite good case studies about people that have gone through the process. It'll be interesting to look at how they took on that challenge. Certainly, they seem to have gone through it reasonably successfully. But yeah, it's always the problem with any kind of technology kind of implementation is taking the people with the right knowledge away from their day job to help get this system in place in order to save them the time that they're spending on that technology, on those tasks in the first place. I'm just going to, in the interest of time, just bring up a couple of points here. So, AI can help in terms of pulling together that data repository. But consider like maybe a holistic kind of data approach in terms of how you're kind of pulling that information together and what the longer term perspective is. But maybe Dean, you can comment maybe about that phasing of projects to kind of implement new technology and your approach with TopUp and how you ensure kind of success with an implementation.
Any implementation we do, we always say is 33% down to the implementation, as in the company that's doing it, 33% down to the software, and 33% down to the actual clients buying themselves. We quite often go through an implementation phase where a client will be adopting a solution, and from the client side of things, people sort of still have a full-time job to do all day every day, which obviously presents issues during the implementation phase. And I think that's apt to any type of solution, whether it be AI, property management, reporting, etc.
Okay. Let's move on. So we've covered the relatively mature technology that's already out there. One that's kind of that kind of nascent point, which is kind of breaking through. Let's talk about the big one, about blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and whether it's actually kind of ready for prime time. Let's start. Dean, your views on where we are in the cycle with blockchain and cryptocurrencies?
I think you picked on me because I said, don't talk to me about this on the call.
No, you don't have to describe it.
No, absolutely. I have very limited knowledge about, obviously, implementation of blockchain, cryptocurrencies, etc. I mean, from my view is that, especially the real estate industry, it's not ready for it. Blockchain is nowhere near in a position to be able to be used. I understand it has some limited use, in the US with lease titles, but my understanding is that, the industry is not really ready for it.
Yeah. Stephen, your
Yeah, I mean,
views?
sure. Yeah, I'll cue off that. It's interesting, right? And I'm not as familiar with the usages here in the UK. In the US now, municipalities are rolling out where you can pay taxes with Bitcoin, and that to me is an interesting signal of reliance on this ethereal, no pun intended, currency that they're willing to take municipal revenues from it, and I think it facilitates things. Obviously, with Bitcoin, it's somewhat. I mean, it does fluctuate, and recently, there's been massive fluctuations. But one of the benefits is, right, you don't have a currency risk potentially, right? You don't have floating currency risk.
Yeah.
As it pertains to blockchain in general, I mean, and adoption, one of the areas it's real estate. And my experience with it is more on the side of the business I'm on the board of back at home. But in the title industry. For property, there's a couple of companies trying to, the title industry, and I know it's an interesting scenario here as well. I know it more in the U.S. It is, the titles for any like property ownership is oftentimes you have to go to like a set of books that are on paper that go back to like the dawn of time, right? And so people spend a ton of money on title insurance just to buy a property, right? Like, so I'm going to buy, and it's the only insurance in the world that I'm aware of that insures you against something that already happened, right? Because if there's like a defect in the title, that's already there. It happened like a long time ago. But I'm buying insurance in case it did, right? As opposed to like my car insurance that, maybe I'm going to run into a telephone pole or I wouldn't do that necessarily, but whatever. The car's going to get, I'm going to get hit. Let's say that example. But but this. So there's a huge industry, a ton of spend. There's an interest and a potential to bring blockchain in because it is theoretically unbreakable chain, right? And it's not necessarily administered by any specific entity, and so theoretically it has this ability to kind of build a bulletproof title digitally. But the problem is there's no incentive. Like, there's a lot of business players that have like a big incentive to preserve these profits they're making off of like ownership over these records and like a relatively low occurrence of insurance payouts. So anyway, that's my cynical view. I mean, it's the perfect solution. Nobody's got the right incentive, so I don't think it'll ever happen, at least not in my lifetime.
Richard, your thoughts?
Yeah, I echo the sentiment from these two gentlemen. It is. You look at the Swedish Land Registry, I think, which is kind of what you're referring to. I mean, they're using it. The commercial impact and what it's really achieving for day-to-day people looking to access those titles, I'm not sure. I actually spent some time with the UK Land Registry about 6 months ago, who are exploring smart contracts on an Ethereum blockchain for mortgage underwriting. But it's so theoretical, right? And even they admitted that this would be a kind of 5 to 10 year discovery project before anything ever really got pushed into production. And I think it's because I asked the question why. I think that no one's really figured out whether or not it's truly worthwhile. In the US, I've come across some pretty interesting, relatively nascent businesses similar to Leviton. That are using blockchain technology for real estate transactions. Why? Because they promise to improve liquidity and reduce transaction friction, which I think is probably two of the things that prohibit people from doing deals in real estate predominantly. But fundamentally, that's kind of also two of the things or paradigms on which the real estate transaction market is built, and people are used to it, and people are kind of comfortable with it, and it's kind of this thing, if it isn't really broken, why are you trying to fix it with this new age technology, which no one really yet truly understands. I personally think that real estate, in the way that it adopts adopts new technology, is probably 10 to 15 years behind the finance industry. Some banks are slowly now warming up to the idea of using, I think it's this cryptocurrency called Ripple for cross-border payments. You've got 5 years ago, all the kind of derivative traders got fired for most banks and replaced with algorithms. At JLL and CBRE, there's still 20,000 people reading leases for a living. So I think that kind of thing needs to be addressed first, and then the smarter, more it's the smarter but more daunting technologies I think will slowly come into adoption, but yeah, maybe 10, 15, 20 years away. I can't say much more than that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, obviously the cryptocurrency itself, that aspect, we can see relevance and we can see usage. It helps in terms of maybe when we kind of look at tokenization of investment. Basically, so for me personally, on the business side, I'm cynical. On the personal side, I'm slightly excited that after putting 2 daughters through university, that I might actually be able to afford to get into real estate through that concept.
The securitization?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a trend as well. Like you see companies like doing, what is it? Like CPOs? Is that what they call them? Like instead of an initial public offering? ICOs. Yeah. That's interesting, right? It sort of, takes the ability to raise capital on an institutional level out of the hands of like investment banks,
Yeah.
which I think is similar to what you're
Yeah.
talking about with
Yeah.
raising capital for property. I think that's interesting, but it's risky. There's a reason that stuff's regulated, right?
Yeah. Okay. On the blockchain side, I think that there's still some way to go. Just as an example, and I shared this earlier if anyone was in my session, is, I kind of was reading basically that if you think of blockchain and you think of the concepts of blockchain, so the information that you're storing is distributed, it's irrefutable, it's stored in multiple places, it can't be deleted everywhere. And then you think of GDPR, and you think about how, we're getting into issues with storing people's personal data. So if blockchain had matured 5 years ago, or GDPR was coming later, then there would be this huge clash between information that's stored that needs to be deleted, that in theory, if it was deleted, would destroy the blockchain, versus the regulation that's coming in. So how it's used, certainly if you're considering at this point, I think you need to consider very carefully what you're storing on the blockchain and how you're going to use it. Is it adding value? I think it could, even now, in terms of what we're seeing perhaps in certain areas. So think about maybe building maintenance, storage of service requests, maintenance requests, how the building has been maintained over time. That information could be very valuable to share with someone when you're actually then valuing and selling that building. And the fact that someone can't go back and alter that maintenance record to show that something has been maintained properly is very important.
I think that's an interesting point. But one of the things I learned about really, I don't have a real estate background. Really, 2.5 years I've been doing this, but I learned very early on that a lot of people make money in this industry and are excited because of the asymmetry of information, and I think they're scared about blockchain because that dissipates, right? It's like it no longer exists as a paradigm. So I think the guys, the big transaction powerhouses, etc. I think they're kind of nervous about this.
Who's in the process of implementing or using blockchain? Anyone?
Yeah.
It's less than a guy.
I was going to say, I'm about to walk out.
Okay.
Off the
All right. Okay, let me just... So maybe there's some practical applications in the short term like that maintenance, implications in the long term for sure. Let's just kind of share the crystal ball for a minute. People's thoughts on the next great innovative technology to hit the real estate market, or in general that the audience should be thinking about or considering. I'll let any of you jump in first.
I think the technology's there, right? I don't think there's going to be a new technology. I think now it's really just about adoption. I mean, the number of hands that went up regarding considering AI was kind of, not concerning, but surprising. And I think that this technology does really have very strong promise. I think it is down to companies like ours and others to set expectations straight. A very good point that was made in the audience. But I do believe that the kind of the big data stuff, the AI, the ML, the RPA stuff is all there. It works. It isn't perfect, but this is a journey that these companies need to go on, and I think it's really about taking the plunge and taking a leap of faith, because I think that you will see the benefits over time.
Anything?
Yeah, I it's probably not sexy, but I think a lot of what's next is, in some cases, looking back a little bit, like I was an evangelist of getting rid of Excel at one point in my technology career, and now working for a company that drives Excel solutions, just acknowledging the fact that business is done on Excel, and we sell a solution that enables that usage. But there is a time and a place for everything, right? Like there is a place for web-based analytical dashboarding solutions, visualizations, things like that. And I think it's just right tool for the right job. Trying to be practical. You made a point earlier about self-service, or I think it was in the context of like not having to go back to the IT department. Part of the problem is like, let's assume you've done your work and you know the question you're trying to answer. You probably won't know all the right data points to get that answer.
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. So you start and you go to the IT department and you say, I need these data points. And then they get it to you 2 weeks later and you get it back and you're like, oh, I need one more.
Yeah.
And you go through that cycle again and it's like soul crushing and it just creates like so much time. And, versus like being able to have the data at your fingertips, like with an analytics product where you can kind of like tweak and play, or with an Insight software where you've got it all in Excel and you can kind of do your thing and you can push the button and update. Like, it's magical for the users, and there's a little bit of training required, but it's not like I have to go through IT school to do it, So I guess my point is like, the things that de-risk are the democratization of some of these things, so it's self-service, and maybe being a little more practical with the tools, and knowing the question you're gonna answer.
I think you're right. I remember being in the exact same position myself, however long ago it was now, was saying we have to get rid of Excel because we had those silos of data where accountants would work on their spreadsheets and not know what they're doing, and then we had the evolution obviously where systems become more open and connected, and I think we're obviously going to see more and more of that as time progresses, and things are going to become more and more connected, and with the use of things like AI and the data intelligence and the integration of that data, I think things become a lot more free and a lot more exchangeable. I think is probably the where I want to go. Sort of open and connect, about the whole open and connected mantra. Really, that you don't have these big hurdles, like you say. You haven't got to go to the IT department and go, okay, I need these 5 data points into my solution. The fact is that the systems will instantly know that automatically, and they'll be able to connect and relate to each other without that need for that.
By the way, I think that's a great point. The open and connected piece is necessary to realize the promise of a lot of these things, to the extent that vendors are like doing this, and a lot of times there's a business case to do this, but in the end game, you're sort of diminishing the value your client's getting, and it's a losing strategy, So the more open, like some companies are really getting their head around this, surprisingly. Oracle with their cloud solution has built like a really, SAP is doing a better job. SAP with their advanced cloud solution has done a wonderful job exposing like all their data points, much like MRI is doing, right? Yeah. So, that is the innovation that will allow people to like break the silos down and build practical stuff, that's designed for what they want to do, versus what the vendor thinks they want to do.
And it's in everyone's interest in there, isn't it? It's in the software vendor's interest because ultimately their system's more exposed. It's in the user's interest because they've got more access data points, and it's kind of a win-win for everyone. Like you say, the companies that are out there still today, they've got that siloed mantra where they're single stack and you can only use my FM, my property management, my investment management, and don't play nicely with other people. I think ultimately they're going to end up losing out unless they change their ways very quickly.
Yeah. Flexible and adaptable to. And being able to connect to outside sources. I'm getting the signal that we need to wrap up. Apologies that we can't carry on. I'll open it up to questions. Hope it was useful and insightful to you. Thank you for your time.